I'm going to start doing the pistons on this video, and naturally first thing I got to do is clean these crankshaft journals that have been exposed for the last 4 weeks and are rusty. So I'm using diesel fuel and a Scotch-Brite pad, and I got a sock on top of it so that I can work it kind of like a shoe shine. I can't show you because I can't hold the camera. We're right in the center of the engine, number 3 and number 4, because those two run together. They're running mates, or and some people call them companion cylinders. They run together. Wherever 3 is, 4 is there too, except they're on opposite ends of the cycle. One is in the compression stroke, the other one's going to be in the valve overlap stroke, and vice versa. Got that one, number 3, got that one polished up pretty good. I just barely did the bottom side. I worked the top side that I couldn't see about 10 times more than I did the bottom side. Guess first thing I gotta do, besides setting up the table to do anything, put the inserts in, or bearings. Naturally, the one with the oil hole goes here, and with these, since there's no moving parts behind them, you don't have to put oil in there. You can put that on dry and push it in tight, snug. Line up your keyway here on the bottom. You've seen that on the mains. And as long as you can feel just a little bit of that bearing on each side, then you're centered pretty good. And if you can't, you can tap it a little bit with something on one side. And the same thing with your cap. I'm going to do one of these with some tape. I got to find the tape. I think that's where you say if it was a snake it would have bit me. Let me just wrap a little bit of tape around there, get the oil off the threads first if there is any. And the idea is, in case it suddenly slams into the crankshaft by accident, that it won't scar it up any. It'll have a little cushion. But the crankshaft has to be wet with oil, and so do these, before we put it on. So if it does hit the crankshaft, it's going to slide off the oil anyway. This is just to even more minimize the possibility of scratching the crankshaft. If it does get a slight scratch in it, then you have to very, very carefully take a very smooth file and buff it down to where it doesn't have a burr. A slight hole won't hurt anything, but a burr will. A burr will scratch the bearing all the way around. Got to pour some oil on this, like that, over this little bowl, and then rotate my rings. Got the ring gaps up on top. Rotate the rings around so that that ring gaps will push the oil all the way around. We'll put some more on there. It's important that the oil is down inside those ring gaps, down inside those ring lands. If you got oil to waste, you can just throw a quart or two of oil in a pan and just dip it in there. You'll have a lot more oil pouring off of it all over the place. You'll be making a huge mess. But you just want to look down in. I'm looking inside these ring gaps while I'm spinning them around. The oil ring is harder to do that because you can't see with the expander in there. You just have to guess that you're getting enough in there all the way around. And if you do this all the time, you got a place set up for it. Well, I don't. And I just don't want to waste all that oil and make such a huge mess. So I'll keep the waste to a minimum. Piston skirt nice and wet. Put some oil here on this bearing. And then I'm going to stand this up inside here. Not that that's where it has to be done. I'm just going to do it that way. We got to position these rings. This is number 3, and he's got a paint mark on it that represents the front side of the engine. But I'm going to double check. I'm going to look underneath and make sure that the side of the rod that would be here, and this side should be have an arrow pointing at me when I'm putting it in, and it does. The arrow is pointing. We'll get to that underneath when we put the cap on, but it's pointing in the right position. Got both of my locking tabs on the same side, rod and on the cap. So I'm in agreement. That's to the front side of the motor. And he's got number 3 written on here. Number 3 is stamped on the rod and on the cap. You can see the number. Where is it? Right there. Number 3. Now you know we got when we put the oil rings on, we got the expander gap on the opposite side. It doesn't slide around inside the oil ring. Okay, I got my oil ring over here, probably around the 4 to 5 o'clock position over here on my right side. And then I'm going to go with about between 1 and 2 o'clock on the right side with the second ring. And then over here on the left side, we'll go with about 180 across from that, which is about or between 7 and 8 o'clock. So we got our 180 apart up here, and then our oil ring has 180 between the outer oil ring gap and the expander gap, which is back here on this side. And it's not all that crucial because the rings, according to I've been told by 2 different machine shop people now. One back when I used to work on car engines, he said the rings are going to move around. They don't stay exactly where you put them. They rotate a little bit. Well, the guy that's helping me on this, he said the same thing. He says that's your goal. It's ideally you want them 180 apart, but they're not going to stay there. I'm using one of these band type ratcheting. Got to grease it up real good on the inside. This one had a lot of surface rust, hadn't been used in years. You guys that are following me know I'm not a mechanic anymore. It's been a long time. I'm a truck driver most of the time. Sometimes I do landscape work, bobcat work, trees, stump grinding. I gotta watch this down the side and try to keep this as square as possible with the piston because it'll go on there crooked. But my ends, I gotta make sure that they're level across the top, the 2 ends. And I gotta make sure that these tightening bands are on the bottom, not on the top. They gotta be on the bottom. And they got to be below the oil ring. This one has to be below the oil ring, and this one has to be above the compression rings. Start cranking it down. Keep these level up here. Might need a slight adjustment. I can't get another click on it. I hope that is tight. I gotta look all the way around it, see if it's square. Well, I don't like it. It's not as square as I want it. That's real important that that's real square on top of that. Shops that do these engines all the time, they got just a funnel type of ring compressor. They set that on the cylinder block, on top of the cylinder, and it's bigger on top. The bottom is just the right size for it to go in there, and the top is bigger. And they set the piston inside of it, put it in there, and then push it down, and the rings just compress on their way down. I don't have one of those because I don't work in a shop where I do engines all the time, because each one's going to be a different size, and you'd have to have who knows how many different ones. But this universal band type, that oil ring is the bear to get in. Compression rings will go in easier, but that oil ring's the hardest one. It's the first one. If you get past that one, you should be on your way home. Well, let's take it out and try it. I already oiled the crankshaft journals down below, and I'm going to oil the cylinders here real good. Well, I got my hand full of it. I'll go ahead and do number 4. You can knock these in a number of different ways. Some people just take a dead blow hammer or a rubber mallet or a block of wood and a hammer. I'm going to do it with 2 hammers. Put the plastic handle down here, take another hammer on top, and tap it in with that. If it stops moving with each tap, then you may have to pull it back out and redo it. Looks like that's what I got to do, because this is uncoiling. Part of it's going down inside. Well, it appears to be getting stuck. I'm going to have to pull it back out of there, I think. This compressor went down in there with it a little bit. Yep, the compressor went down in there with it. I had to go back underneath and knock it out the same way I did when I took them out in the first place almost a month ago. I got it out and it's just hooked it up here on top, and then I had to take the compressor off and inspect all the way around, make sure that we didn't damage or break any of the rings. That's why you never try to force that thing down there, because the rings can break and you can put them in with broken rings and not know it. Probably, I'm sure they'll go in easier with broken rings. All my rings are looking good. Just adjust them a little bit, put the ring compressor back on, take another shot at it. I'm checking the gap with this key. I'm just holding it like this with my finger. Adjust my finger to the top of this band clamp here and then just check it around. And when it seems like it's pretty close to the same, and then these 2 end gaps are the same, then I feel like I might be in a good spot to go ahead and crank it down. If it'll crank, doesn't seem like it wants to. Something's in the way. I had to go up and buy a bigger ring compressor. Let's see if I can get it in there this time. This new ring compressor has the tightening bands on it farther apart, and the upper one is much higher than it is on the other one. The other one, the upper band, is kind of in the middle, and so I was concentrating those 2 bands right over the rings. But this one, the upper band's going to totally miss the top of it if I try to do that with this one. So I'm putting it on farther down, and it's actually squaring it up on the thing a little bit better too. I've been kind of tapping on it, kind of get it adjusted a little bit, and I think we got it pretty close. I'm going to crank it down just a little bit more and then put it outside on the cylinder and put it in. Guess what? It went in. Great! That's what I like to see. Now I got to take a peek underneath and make sure everything is lined up good down there. And then we just push it straight down onto the crankshaft. Everything looks good, so I'm going to push it on down there. There it is. Now all we got to do is get the tape off of these. Like so. Put the rod cap back on. It's on there. I tightened it down with a 1/2-inch drive ratchet, fairly tight. I'm going to put a torque wrench on it after I get the other one on next to it. We'll put a torque wrench on there and tighten it down to about 125. And this arrow that's on here on the bottom is pointing that way, which is the driver's side, and it's pointing towards the camshaft side of the engine, is what somebody said on a video I watched before I started this. Now I'm going to go up top and put another one in. My number 5 rod was bad, and they gave me another used rod that came out of a number 2. This is the one that's going into number 5. To avoid any confusion, if this motor ever has to be done again, you see what I'm going to do. I'm going to shave that number 2 off of there, and I'm going to put 5 peck marks in it. Got it done. Just barely shaved that off a little bit. The 2, you can still, if you look for it, you can still see it in there. But you see the 5 peck marks on each side. And if somebody thinks that changes the weight on it, it doesn't. Any more than spitting in the ocean changes the water level. Got them all in there. Isn't that pretty? Now I gotta cover it all up with a bunch of dirty clothes because it's nightfall again. And then in the morning we'll put the head on.